Let's start off with Tongaat-Hulett, part of the Anglo-American Industrial Group. It got kicked out and then they lost the aluminium business. Well, they didn't lose it, they unbundled it to their shareholders. So really what you're dealing with now, the current Tongaat-Hulett run by Peter Stadi, it's three business divisions. Sugar, which is the main part of the business, not just here in South Africa, but also in other regions, as we'll discover. There's a starch and glucose business. That's the one that sits, I don't know, somewhere up in northern KZN and makes maize-related supplements that they put into beer for SAB Miller. And then critically, it's got a property development business. That's because they've got all this old, sugarcane fields, which have turned out to be in the greater Durban area. And that's been a major win for them. As Durban has expanded, they've been able to sell agricultural land to the land developers. It's also focused in recent years on significantly expanding that sugar operations. It's now principally up in Mozambique, and as we'll discover in a minute, Zimbabwe. Price to earnings ratio, I'm told, is 14.4. That's sort of in the middle of the range. Dividend yield sits at 2%. Market cap, after some wobbly trading in recent months, idling around the 15 billion rand mark. Ian, first thoughts about Tongaat-Hulett? How do you fall on this one?
Just one addition to the operations that wasn't mentioned was renewable energy.
Okay.
And that's becoming more of a factor. Just look at what's happening to liquid fuel. I think that it's going to become more and more important. It's not a major part of their operation yet, but it's one with a lot of potential.
And that's waste-related products that they're converting into steam and using for cogeneration in order to supplement, reduce their dependence on grid electricity.
So it can bring down their waste cost, and it can also bring a new income stream. It's not large yet, but I think there's a lot of potential.
Okay, let's just talk about the sugar issue, because as we were alluding to in our earlier conversation, they decided to go up into Mozambique. They got those big sugar estates in Genevan, which I think is somewhere around Shai. But then critically, they went to Zimbabwe, where they then decided in that Masvingo province to do that big estate. I always call it Happy Valley, but it's not Happy Valley, it's Hippo Valley, right?
Okay.
So now the problem, of course, is in Zimbabwe, there are indigenization issues. And we know that the problems that they're having with regard to implants and so on. So where do you see this one going as far as they're concerned?
As a very real threat. And it's not the largest part, but it's a significant part of their operations. And it may just turn them back from the rest of Africa development that they've been doing. But certainly the threat in Zimbabwe is a very real one. And the trouble is that it can be done with little or no compensation. So yes, that's worrying.
Big concern.
Absolutely.
Because as I understand it, the reason to go to these countries in the first place, apart from the geographical diversification you mentioned earlier, is because if you produce sugar in a country like Mozambique, you get most favored nation access into the European market. Because you're coming from a place that is deemed to be, below a certain level of development.
Right.
Therefore, you get favorable trade terms. So in addition to selling sugar into those local markets, they also package and export that to Europe and other markets. So that's the reason for going for it. Plus, we all know that the weather and the growing circumstances up in Zim are fabulous.
Absolutely.
As it always goes in Central Africa, if you put a broomstick in the ground, it'll start growing.
And remember, Zimbabwe, they used to call the breadbasket of Southern Africa.
Yeah.
And that just hardly exists. But it can be redeveloped.
But here's the problem, you go and put in a couple of 100 million rands worth of infrastructure development, water piping, terracing, sugar, you get it under construction, you employ local people to facilitate there, and then the government savior Kasukowere wanders in and says, no thanks, this thing is not good enough, we need to have 50% of this operation, thank you very much.
Well, there is a view on that says better to have 49%, which a South African operation would have, than nil of what could be a very viable proposition. Yes, it usually happens after the big capital commitments, and so there's not a great return on capital there, but nevertheless, it's a threat. It seems that it's been not diminishing, but less in the focus at the moment.
Yeah.
But
this
to
is
be
a
worried
concern.
about.
But let's come back home. What about the Mount Edgecombe, Zimbali land development activities around Durbs? Because 5 years ago, that was going gangbusters, but that was the nature of the spatial development of the country. Now we know after 08, 09 went into a big slump, too many golf estates.
Sure.
So now where are you feeling with regard to that? Do you think that's beginning to come back and could be seen as a net positive for the share?
I think it's a developmental area, and I think what we have to say is the majority of people who were investing, we call it investing and not speculating in that area, probably could afford it. Perhaps not all, but nevertheless, I think there's been a weeding out of those that were doing it out of the grocery money, and I think that now it's probably more soundly based. And where are they going to go? It's a great development area. The land is needed, so yes, it's a lot of potential.
Because there's been all that quality sort of commercial development in the Mshlanga area,
yes,
and the larger environs. The coastline's great, the weather's great.
And the new airport, yes.
Exactly. So now what do we do though? Because for the last 6 months, this thing has gone sideways at around 140 Rand a share. I think the Zimbabwe thing was sort of around about here.
Yes.
Took a bit of a blow to the guts there. How are you feeling about this one?
Well, yes, it's at the top of the range. If we just look in the last year or so, in 2012, it was down there at around about 90 Rand.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's had a heck of a good run. But it depends on the market as a whole. It's an area that's always going to have potential. And I'd say, sure, you've got to have it in your portfolio. One needs to have it in one's portfolio. Would one be adding? Probably. If you didn't have it, it would be a buyer.
Okay, so you're mildly hot on that one.
Yes.
I'm going to go with you on that one.
Okay.
Hot sounds good to me.
Right.